Ox.
Mikey.
Yo, what's up, man?
Dude, I am taking the most needed rest day I have had in months.
I saw you talk about this earlier today. What's going on?
Dude, so I've got the show season coming up this summer, we'll call it. I'm not going to actually use the dates because one of these weirdos will like show up and be like, "Ha, I got you." Um, but so we're doing a little pre-prep phase for the next little over a month, actually exactly a month as of New Year's. So just reaching the end of this training block, I have a week off planned at the end of the month, January, obviously not this one, and then we start prep. But I've been hitting this training cycle hard and really, really focusing on trying to bring up some muscles and pack on as much as I can before. So it's been really pushing it. We'll put it that way.
It was leg day.
It was
I feel like there's only one day, actually two, I'd say. It's like it's either leg day or like back day that just completely could drain like the life out of you.
Thank you for accidentally setting me up for a shill. It was actually a density day. Uh, the the split that I've that's in my upcoming program on the 15th. Thanks for that. Um,
Let's
but
go.
density, so it's basically back thickness. So mid, upper back, lower back, if you want to consider that, and then hamstrings, glutes, backside, with a little bit of quad in there because it's going to be hard to hit legs without touching any quads. But so the density day and that, I mean, dude, it's a pretty decent day. Honestly, it's an easy training day. Usually I go in, it's going to be some type of, usually like a straight leg dead, something like that. Then I'm going to transition right into back. Lately, I've just been loving the hammer strength, plate loaded ISO row, I think is the name for it. You know what I'm talking about. Anyone that follows me on Twitter knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's
Then
classic.
some type of lat movement, like to do like plate loaded pull downs, or I'll alternate that between sessions with like cable pull downs. So like really specific cable pull downs. I have one that I just love. It's biomechanically perfect. Then after that, it switches right into legs. Usually leg curls, leg compound, maybe a leg extension if I'm feeling froggy, and then glutes, and then done. But it's
So it,
so
it
it's not
combines.
much.
It sounds like it combines like the two most draining muscle groups.
Yeah, it's not much on paper when you look at it. It's only a handful of exercises, but it's the fact that yeah, they're big muscle groups, and typically the movements to hit those muscles aren't exactly the easiest movements. It's not a pec deck. It is not a little dumbbell lateral raise. It's leg press. Even leg curls to me, honestly, they suck. Once you get into higher reps, you
Yeah.
stand up and your legs are just fried. You're like, okay, that sucks.
Yeah, yeah. I did some actually leg curls yesterday. I had to squeeze them in at the end of a quad focus leg day. And because I kind of was running low on time, I was there for too long. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna hit one really hard set of like leg curls. And I did myo reps, if you're familiar with myo reps.
Yep.
So if for anybody who's not familiar, it's like you hit like 15, you're like 15 like where zero RIR at 15 reps,
To
and
failure
then
for the
to
layman.
failure, right? To failure. And after that, you take like these 5 breath breaks, as many as you need to get back up to that 15 again. So it's 30 total reps, but you're hitting failure at like 5 different points. And I swear by the time I was done with that, like after like a full leg day, it was just absolutely brutal. It felt incredible, but yeah,
You just
cramps that night.
you just asked a person whose foundation was built on DC training, which is all rest pause, which is myo reps, myo sets.
Yeah.
If they know what that is.
Yeah.
Yes, very, very
I'm so
familiar.
nervous.
Oh my
I forgot who
gosh.
I was talking to.
Dude,
No. Yeah.
our two viewers are gonna listen to this, both of our moms.
Mom.
So it's
Yeah.
time to
Yeah, yeah.
it's nerve-wracking. Please be
Yeah.
proud of me. But yeah, leg cramps. I feel you on that because
Do you still get those? Because they went away from me for a while. Like, I swear to God, back I think it was like 2017. Like, I was really freaking shredded down in Florida. I was lifting, and at night I would just always go to bed and get these cramps in my quads all the time. Like every leg day, every time. Like I would just be so sore to the point where I would get these cramps. But that went away for so many years, and only recently, when I've been really stepping it up on my leg training, has it come back. And it's like, I mean, do you get that often? Like,
you kind of just I had this answer I was about to give you in my head, this theory I have, and then you kind of just confirmed it in the same sentence. I think that's a sign of overstimulation where I don't want to call it too much volume because it's not necessarily too much volume,
yeah,
but it's you really tax the muscle.
yeah,
And
and then you're out for like too long. It's like it's not because I don't. Before we get lost in the weeds, like I'd prefer to hit things more frequently than hit it all like crazy in one session. Like hitting your quads like maybe twice a week is probably better than once a week as far as I'm aware. And so, yeah, like if you just hit it really like uber hard in one session, it's like you're out for like a week. It just kind of like throws everything off. You know what I mean? So you're probably right.
yeah, I think it's because I only really experienced it when I first got into lifting, like every leg day. Okay, I'm cramped. And then I'll notice if I've been less intense. I don't want to say half-assing. I try not to ever half-ass the gym, but if I haven't been going as hard as I can, i.e., half-assing it, I'll notice that once I get right back into dialing it in, going hard, they'll start to pop up again. And then towards the end of a training block, once I'm really taxed, probably within the next few weeks, I'll probably pop up. But it also a lot of it is like your electrolyte balance. Like, have you been hydrating right? Are you getting the right carb intake too? Because I know if my carbs are lower, and that has to do with electrolytes too, that I'll start to get these leg cramps. But I don't really, I was agreeing with you, but not because I had cramps, just that my legs were so sore. And that's what I
Right.
was telling you. I think it was yesterday. Right before my session, I was like, okay, my legs are still sore from I think it was Thursday. I was like, okay, what do I do? And I hopped in a magnesium bath, magnesium chloride. So not like Epsom salt, like actual magnesium, even though some people vehemently argue that your body can't absorb it. Well, and I know hot water and all that's good for soreness and all that, but this isn't placebo. Like I've done with or without, and I felt good as new. My lower back was kind of tight. My quads were trashed. Sat in this magnesium bath for like 20, 30 minutes. And I was like, "Ooh, no, I'm fresh. That's
Yeah.
cool." I use
I
like
remember talking to you about this. You were like, I'm not sore. I
I was
feel
like,
okay.
I have to say it on the podcast. I got to let them know. But
Yeah.
I'll use like I don't know how much I use. It's a lot, probably too much, but I swear by it.
Pretty
It is a
incredible.
godsend for recovery.
I'll have to think about getting something like that because I don't really have a regimen for that kind of soreness, but I am like experiencing that because I am pushing like purposely. Maybe this is a good jump off point to the topic for today, but I am pushing my volume a bit, and I feel like I am getting to the point where I'm hitting that point that too much volume almost, and so you know maybe I just needed more magnesium.
Maybe more
you know
magnesium.
that's
It's
the
one.
trick. Yeah.
It's one of those things, and anyone that's like on Twitter, Grim Hood, he's the magnesium guy, and you can read through his stuff like transdermal magnesiums or topical magnesium. So, like if you're getting it through a bath or whatever, it's legit. I love doing it. But yeah, you used a word volume there, which we will have many episodes centered around that word. Um, but like what we wanted to talk about today, kind of the whole synopsis, our target, well, one of them, anyone can learn from this, but a lot of people I feel, especially beginners, especially people that have, made, and it's, hey, it's New Year. So there's a bunch of those people right now. They're like, okay, I'm going to get into the gym. Let's go. I'm ready to get in shape, whatever. Okay, now what? Because there's so much information online, it's almost you can get overloaded. And a lot of people too will really fixate on like, how do I do it the best and all that, which is something you shouldn't be worried about. But it is a valid question of like, okay, how do I train? Like, how do I even approach this? Like, do I go in? What exercises do I do? How much of those exercises do I do? Blah, blah, blah. And if you've been on the social medias, it can be pretty convoluted with what to do. So today we were going to, really hit on what is it that you should be doing? What are these parameters that you need to hit? What are these foundations of training that you need to do to grow muscle? What does training for building muscle, what does that look like? So that is where we are.
I think it might be worth it before jumping into the details because there are some great details that we're going to probably jump into, probably that we are going to jump into, but where it's you have sort of like broad focus should a beginner be thinking of, or how should they approach it, intermediate, and how they should approach it. And I think just before we get started, I think a good reminder for beginners is, for people who are just getting into the gym, is you really are blessed with this period of, like maybe 3 years where you're granted what are known as newbie gains. And that's basically God's gift to you, that you can basically, you know, you could almost do what. And correct me if I'm wrong, or whatever you feel of this, Ox. But it's like, you could almost like look at weights and grow. That's kind of like one of the jokes of being a newbie. It's like, you're so ready to receive stimulus as a newbie that, like, you can basically go into the gym and you can, you know do all the wrong things and you'll still grow. Uh and I think the reason I bring this up is because that period of time needs to be spent not aimlessly doing anything, because by the time you end that 3-year period, you're going to be left where the newbie gains are no longer coming, and you're left with terrible technique, terrible habits. And so those three years, and this is kind of a primer to what we're going to get into, is those 3 years need to be spent focused on the right things, which is why we're talking about what we're talking about today, such that when the newbie gains start to dry up, you're set to continue to make some steady gains as an intermediate. So I
That's
just
why I
wanted
like the
to,
name
yeah,
foundations. Like we were like, oh, what do we call this? Foundations. Because this is truly setting a foundation, because a lot of people do hit that period after newbie gains. And for me, I would say it can even be less than 3 years for some people, and all depends on your development. And actually, if you do everything right, your newbie gains period will probably actually be a little bit shorter, but that's not a bad thing, because it's
right,
pretty much like there's a threshold of how much muscle and everything you're going to put on. And then that determines, are you an intermediate, are you advanced, are you beginner, whatever. It's not necessarily a time frame. three
right,
years is fair for a lot of people,
yeah.
but a
It's a
lot
bit
of people
conservative.
they hit the end of that, and they stall, and they stall out because they never actually established the know-how and the habits that actually lead to long-term muscle growth. Because like you said, newbie gains, it is proof of whether you're religious, so you attribute it to God, higher design, the simulation, whatever. It is proof that sometimes good things happen to us good people, because it's magic. It is
Yeah.
magic. You could go into the gym, and that's why a lot of programs that aren't necessarily good for hypertrophy, which is, for those of you that might not know the technicals, hypertrophy is basically just a fancy word for muscle growth. So a lot of people will see programs like starting strength, and I think most people can agree, I would hope, especially fitness coaches would agree, it's not a optimal hypertrophy program. I would argue it's not great for hypertrophy beyond this period. And not to say it's even great for this period, depending on your goals, but it's easy to follow, very simple. Go in, do it, and you're going to see results. But a lot of people then, like, they'll die on that hill that it's the best way ever, but it's like, eh. And even literature and everything is going to show you, okay, no, there's actually way better ways to do this. So that's basically where we want to. get into this is, so you go into the gym tomorrow. What does it look like? And before we get into like what you should do, what your exercises are, the big thing, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you have a general idea of probably what exercise you should do. Pretty easy. You're like, most people have an idea. And as a beginner, again, it doesn't really matter. You're like, okay, upper body, like chest, bench press. Okay. Legs, squat, back for a lot of people. It's not necessarily, I won't get into the semantics of this, but back, deadlifts, then, maybe pull-ups or something. They have a general idea of what it kind of looks like. So we'll get more into that. But okay, I know I need to do these things. How much of those do I need to do? And that's where we'll leave you with our first little nugget guideline here. So, in terms of what you should be doing, we can call that like load, like how heavy should you be going in relation. Usually, we gauge things based off of like your 1 rep max. So, in relation to that, how heavy should we be going? That's like the definition of load here. So, the data shows really 30 to 80% of 1 rep max, which is a whole bunch of reps. I think, honestly, I think 30% of your 1 rep max would be probably like 50 reps. And where 80% is going to be, I believe that's around 5. I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Sounds about right.
But that's very broad too. So 5 to, might even be less, but 5 to 50 reps,
Let's say 5 to 30.
5 to 30. But even I think literally it would be closer to 50. But to what you're saying, that's a little bit too broad.
Right, right, yeah.
A general agreed upon consensus in the bodybuilding hypertrophy world is generally 6 to 20 reps. If you trained in a 6 to 20 rep range and you just focused on getting stronger within that range, I'm going to be hard pressed to say you're not going to be maxing out your efforts for maximizing muscle growth.
As a beginner, like, they're gonna, they're gonna grow, with, a crazy range of reps or whatever cadence. Their technique is gonna be crap, but the 6 to 20, I think, is a solid. I think that's pretty solid.
Yeah, because you're always going to have that period where you're going to go in, you're only going to get 1 or 2 reps because you're just like, oh, I didn't know what weight I could do with this. But just for building that foundation, a good area to aim for is 6 to 20 reps. And I know that's a big rep range. Like it's that's 14. Well, it's more than that. Math's weird, but
No, it
what
is
is
14 reps. Yeah,
well,
it's
kind of, but
14
do you
rep
have to
difference.
count 6 and 20? So does it become it's like 15, 16 reps? It's math's weird when you have to include the numbers and do that. Ranges are
Yeah,
weird, dude.
yeah, yeah.
I'm not that smart. But that's a good range. It's
I mean,
broad though.
a lot of people, they I think a lot of newbies, unless they go into like the whole starting strength thing, I think a lot of them pick like the 10 to 12 rep range, which is solid. It's like right there,
That's
right in the middle.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like as long as you're within that range. And I mean, hey, this is what we're here to do. Get into why 6 to 20 works is generally for growth, we're going to see benefit where the way you're trained, it's actually called the SAID principle, which is the specific adaptations to impose demands, which basically means there are certain ways we want to train to get certain results. So within that, we find this 6 to 20 rep range to be good. So the reason is, and you can kind of get into it, we talked about this on the phone the other day. At the lower end of the rep range, those are really, really good for building strength. Not only they're good for hypertrophy, but that's going to be a lot of mechanical tension. As you get higher, 15, 20, you're still getting the mechanical tension, but we get things that come into play like, even though the data and some things are saying it doesn't matter, I'm hard pressed to say it doesn't, but you start getting to things like metabolic stress and all that that can contribute to growth. So within this range, essentially you're taking advantage of every mechanism that can contribute to muscle growth. And they all kind of play into each other in this like symphony. So if I work, and I talk about this in how I train, I do 2 sets, a load set and a back off set. So the load set's going to be 6 to 9 reps. It's obviously heavier weight I'm going to do that. And that's really priming my body um, to a degree with, with strength adaptations as well as the hypertrophy adaptations. So you're going to get stronger just overall in this rep range. Then you're going to back off. You're going to go, we'll call it 12 to 15 reps. It's going to be a lighter weight and it's going to be on paper less mechanical tension and all this, but it's still within this range that's going to produce the goal we want, which is muscle growth. The reason I really like this setup for training is because you're going to be erring more on the side of hypertrophy mixed with strength gains in this like 6 to 9 rep range. So as you get just stronger overall, what that's going to do is you're actually going to that's going to translate to being stronger in these higher rep ranges as well. So if you refer back to our first episode, what drives progress and fitness in general, but especially with muscle growth, it's going to be progressive overload. So by developing this overall strength, by working in these lower rep ranges, you're going to be stronger and being able to progressive overload in other rep ranges as well as that lower rep range. That's kind of getting into the weeds, and I'll definitely go into that more. Probably could have done it better, but I think we get the gist.
Yeah, I think that's pretty solid. I think this logically leads into from here how much of each of these sets do we need per muscle group per week.
And that is the biggest debate, I would say, yeah, the
It
biggest
is
debate
definitely, yeah.
in the world of muscle growth because you'll even have people that will argue against the 6 to 20 rep range. Some people be like, no, 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 it's worthless to go over 10 or 12 or whatever. But general consensus is if you train this way, you're good. Now, where we're about to get into, there are people that will straight up be like, no, it's worthless and you shouldn't be doing that much. And that is volume. How much should you be doing? So, volume, we can translate that to, for this context, how many sets total you're doing. And in this context, how many sets are you doing per body part or per muscle? So, this is where I'll let you take it. Things get very convoluted, to say the least, here.
Yeah, I think it's probably worth discussing like why it gets a bit convoluted. And I think it's because, well, it's not, I think it's because there are many there are two real main approaches to training for muscle growth. And one of them is with how intense you're lifting with, and intensity in this case actually refers to how close to failure are you training. So if you're, let's say you're bench pressing, right, and your rep range that you're aiming for is 10 reps. If on that 10th rep you you just can't get that 10th rep, and it's just too heavy, and the target muscle is the limiting factor, and you're being able to push that final rep out, then you push that exercise to failure. Now, this is this training to failure is where you see a lot of growth happening. um, a lot of growth is contributed to this. And so, so the question then arises: well, if we were to train to failure, well, how many sets of that do we need in order to grow at our best? And so that's where you get lots of discussion, because people are trying to find, well, volume versus intensity. Well, how many sets versus how intense? Where is the sweet spot? And so there's a ton of debate that's gone back, I think, like 60 years now, where people have discussed this. But the good news is that both sides of this argument, which is, you could say, maybe the lower volume side and the high intensity, and then the higher volume guys, over the years, they've both converged towards a more middle ground. And now it seems that people are kind of fighting over inches instead of where it used to be over miles. And so that's why we're fortunate enough in that we can say with a lot of confidence that somewhere in the 10 to 20 sets per muscle group is probably going to get you to the best results you're going to need that you're going to get. But I'll let Ox actually add in a bit of nuance here, because when I say 10 to 20, that does fall outside some of these people who have found that you can get, really great results in as little as 5 sets per muscle group per week.
Even less in cases. And
Yeah.
to even back it up further, when you get into this discussion of volume and intensity, you have to realize that there's a relationship here, and it's an inverse relationship. So if we're consistently training closer to failure or to failure, that's going to be higher intensity. Then our volume needs are actually going to get lower. You don't need to do as much because you are pushing these sets harder. But if you just don't like to work out close to failure, it's just not your thing, and you train a little bit less intense. Let's say you're 3 reps away from failure. Well, you're going to need a little bit more volume because proximity to failure is a pretty good metric for effectiveness to a degree. So the closer you are to this, the less you need. The further away you are, the more you need. So it has this inverse relationship with its own nuances, but it's generally an inverse relationship. So I thought this is where you were going to go with it. Another good side of this is you could. It doesn't matter which one you do, as long as you're not going to super extremes, you're still going to see progress. That's the great
Right.
part of this. And that's where I don't like this turning into this crazy debate, because it's like, guys, there's a million ways to skin this cat. You don't have to
Especially as a
train.
beginner. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to train in this specific way. So in general, yeah, like you said, 10 to 20 sets is great. I would even say, 6 to where I probably err towards is even closer to 6 to 15. I'm still within these numbers. There are
I think
cases.
that's solid. I've seen a lot of I know this kind of people get cringe at this, but I've seen in the evidence based community, yeah, that those numbers were thrown around as well, based on a lot of the six being you can get like a significant growth just in the 6 to, like you said, I think 15 set per muscle group per week range. So yeah, I mean that's backed up total, I think, by quote the science. So
And
that's
ultimately, what it really comes down to, there's going to be some people, and I'm one of them. I can take it, I can just push myself to the max on command. Every set, I know I can take this thing to failure. So for me, knowing myself, I know, okay, cool. I'm going to do a higher intensity, lower volume approach because I know I can get myself into that mental place. It's kind of, we talked about this at the end of the episode, the first one. I can get myself into this place where I'm intense and I can just put max effort. There are literally just some people that cannot do that. You're probably more balanced mentally in life and happier than I am, but you don't tap into this stuff, and so it's just not going to be an effective training for you. So okay, you're going to have to do more. But yeah, generally, if you're a lower volume guy, like if you can bring this intensity like me, yeah, 6 to 15. But even within this, I would say on average, I'm doing probably, we'll just call it 10 sets per muscle group, give or take. Um, but that's generally where I'm at. So I'll call it that's a good recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty solid. And as far as recommendations for like beginners, a lot of this stuff, you really what you should do is just try to hit, every muscle group, every session. Uh what do you think of that actually? The training like full body, hitting every muscle group per session, uh that you can fit into like an hour and a half workout or an hour workout,
In a
you know,
perfect world,
in a perfect world, yeah.
everyone would be doing a full body workout split. That would be, everyone would start out that way. 3 days a week, however you want to break it up. I would do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You could do, if you want to take more time off, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, but whatever. Like generally it's going to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You get the gist. As long as there's a rest day between each session, 3 sessions a week, math, we can split this up. I would, that's like, I'll die on that hill. That's how everyone should start training. But,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of people that just don't like training that way because it's hard. It is really hard knowing each workout. I think we all have a bias. There's something we like to do in the gym. For me, I love push days. Going into the gym on a push day, doesn't even feel like a workout to me. I'm like, cool. I am so happy to be here. This is going to be awesome. Yay. It's a push day. Pull day, a little bit less so, but still like, okay, cool. This is as long as it's not crazy because back can be taxing. On a pull day, it's like, okay, cool. Still happy to be here. Leg day, hit or miss for me. I know there's some people that are much better than I am, and they're like, oh, I love leg days. What are you talking about? I legs are hard.
It's a love-hate relationship for most
It's my
people.
it's probably objectively my best group too. Like I move the most weight. It and maybe that's why it's so hard to me.
Yeah,
So a full
for sure.
body for me is hard because I don't have those mental reprieves where it's like, okay, cool. Okay, cool. Tomorrow, and it actually ironically tomorrow is a push day. It's like cool. Okay, cool. Okay. Next day, oh, leg day. Oh, fuck, it's a leg day.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, if I get through this, I got a pull day the next. So like, I like having those mental reprieves where it's like, okay, I have training I'm actually going to look forward to. That's where full body can be. That's where it can get tricky because you're like, oh, it's leg day again, or well, I'm hitting
Right,
legs this
yeah.
workout. Next
Yeah,
workout, oh,
it's a bit like Groundhog Day as
I'm
well.
hitting
It's
legs
kinda
again.
like yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I'm hitting legs again. That's why I actually like
Yeah.
to. This is such a side tangent, but I like to split my full body days where one's like an upper focus and then one's a lower focus. So it might be where on the upper focus, I'm doing more sets for upper body. Maybe I'm working heavier rep ranges on the upper body. And then on lower body, I might even do less sets. I have a program set up where I do on a heavy upper, lighter lower, I'll do 2 sets per body part on upper and I'll only do 1 set per body part on legs, and it'll be lower reps on upper, higher reps on legs, and then it inverses the next workout. 2 sets on each leg workout, 1 set on the upper. But I mean, that's just a side note. You can really set this up however you want. And that kind of reminds me something I wanted to say earlier. Let me ADHD brain this back 5 minutes. As a beginner, one of the most important things to do is actually find out what you respond best to and what you like I was saying, if you're a guy that you've got the movements down, so you're not going to hurt yourself, but you err towards the side of you can really push a set hard. Cool. Start experimenting with your training that way. Maybe lowering volume, playing with raising it, lowering it, see where it's at. And if you're not one of those guys, raise it, lower, see what works for you. That's a
Right.
big part of this. So sorry to back that up, but to bring it back to full body. That would be my general recommendation. At the very minimum, I would say upper lower because that's still
Like a 2-day a week, you mean?
no, 3 days a week. You can do 4 days, but it would be like Monday upper, Wednesday lower, Friday upper. Then the next week, Monday lower, Wednesday upper, Friday lower. So it's if you average it out over a time span, it's roughly going to be 2 days a week frequency, but it alternates like that. Or you could just make it really easy and do upper lower rest, upper lower rest, and then keep on repeating that cycle. Either way, it doesn't matter. But I'm hard pressed. It works, and no matter it's like I'm putting out a program that's not necessarily for beginner. They could run it, but it's not necessarily. I'm not telling people, "Oh, you're a beginner. You should run this,"
Yeah.
because it's a modified push pull legs, and no matter how many times I say that, like, hey, a full body's probably better for you. You're brand new to the gym or whatever. They're gonna do it. They're gonna do it. I
I
was,
think actually, yeah, I was gonna say, I think a good strategy for people might be to start off with at like if you're brand new and you've never gone to the gym before or whatever, starting off with like 2 days a week, and as your adherence and enjoyment kind of hold, that you can start adding more days per week, and to just until you get to that like 2 to 4 days a week range, I think is pretty solid.
yeah, uh, yeah, because that gets us into frequency, and
Right.
that's how much do you need to be hitting a muscle per week? Really? you can get away with 1 day a week because like that would be a bro split, right? You're only hitting, and for if you don't know a bro split, it would be like chest, back on separate days, a chest day, a back day, a leg day, an arm day, a shoulder day, or however you want to mix that in there. That would be a bro split. There's some people that even do
Basically,
like ab
yeah,
and calf days, whatever, but you're basically splitting the body up into individual muscles, and that's all you're focusing on. So 1 day a
once a
week
week, yeah.
on that works. I would say probably the most I would ever really recommend is 3 days a week, hitting a muscle 3 days a week, which would be our full body split. Everything's getting hit 3 days a week because frequency essentially becomes a way to spread out our volume so that, and I find this works really well compared to just trying to like, for a beginner, just doing a bro split. You don't really even need necessarily that much as a beginner to grow. So to devote an entire day to, just a few exercises, it's kind of like, okay, you didn't need to break up your volume that much when you could do, an exercise on this day, rest another exercise on this day, rest another exercise on this day, and spread your volume out that way. So let's say each person's still doing, we'll make it really easy because I'm not good at math, obviously. We'll call it 9 sets per week, is what you're aiming for, right? So Monday you do three, Wednesday you do three, Friday you do three. Where like on a bro split, you're just like, okay, I'm going to do all 9 today. I don't think for honestly just most people, unless you're like high level bodybuilder, I don't think that's the most efficient way to train. I do not think you'll grow the best. I think having a
Yeah,
little bit more frequency and spreading that volume out, it's giving your body more opportunities to grow. You're giving it more looks per week.
exactly,
So
yeah.
I'll kind of die on that hill that
It's yeah,
generally.
no, it's been tested actually. I don't have like obviously the studies in front of me, but it's been tested and higher frequency does result in better like if you hold volume the same, higher frequency actually results in better muscle growth.
In our relationship, I would never I would have thought I would be the one
The
spouting
study
out
guy. Yeah.
studies, and then but it's turned out you're the study guy, and I'm just kinda like the, "Oh,
At
yeah."
least for this episode.
You're really into them right now.
Right
Like,
now I
you're
am, yeah.
really into them. Where I'm like, it's not to say I'm not into them,
You're
but it's
like
just
returning
that
to your roots a bit. The
I
bro is resurging after having already conquered that mountain.
it's yeah, it's like I put so much time years ago, and even in 2021 was a big year of really being into the literature to the point where it's now kinda like, "Okay, cool. I know this. Now I'm gonna left curve it." Like, I'm not really gonna get too deep into the weeds on, okay, so on this study we saw, I'm just kinda like, all right, trust me, bro. This works, bro. Just trust me, bro. But when
Yeah.
everyone gets to that's a good point to be in your career is where you're not having to constantly resort back to things. Not to say it's a bad thing that you're doing. It's awesome. And I'll have a period in my life where I'm really back on it. But it's kind of nice to be at a level of knowledge where you're like, okay, cool. I don't really need to reference anything.
Well, instinct is your instincts are already like fine tuned after all the work you've put in already.
Yeah,
So
and even
yeah.
it can come down to like my own programming for how I lift on a day to day. It doesn't always have to be a set plan. There's times I go in there and I'm like, nah, today we're not doing that much. Or, oh, no, hey, today we're feeling good. We're going to do a little bit more because I just know the instincts, auto regulation, which I think
Yeah.
is the end goal for everyone. That's my
Yeah.
end goal for people listening to me.
Intelligently auto regulate. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
So,
and you know it's funny because the thing is, right now, when it comes to being, really into like reading the literature, all my interest right now is on the volume and intensity debate. And I know a lot of people are maybe cringing at that, but the frequency thing, that was a recall. I don't remember what the last time I researched frequency was, but I do remember that, and that was one of those things that stood out to me, and because I guess because it really influenced my own training. So, so with my own training, I try to get as high a frequency as I can manage, and little fun little bit of factoid for people who may be more advanced or intermediate out there is a lot of these programs where they have these catch up programs where it's like you want to catch up a lagging muscle group or whatever. It's like the whole like concept behind them is to raise the frequency and
Ooh,
volume on that muscle group.
ooh, that's a good point.
Right. Yeah.
It's not even that it's a lagging body part on me. Um, Biceps on leg days. Starting my leg days off with some biceps. Why? I find, and this is personal, it does apply to a lot of people, but it might not apply to you listening, mom. Um, a lot of people find that their biceps really don't get that sore and their biceps can handle a lot. So I'll do a bicep exercise on leg day because I'm like, it's not going to hurt. And I'm not going to lie. I had a coach program this before. So that's kind of where I found it. But I'm not going to lie. And this is a big reason why I keep doing it. Like I said, leg day is my least favorite day. I think it's the visual aspect. An upper body pump to me looks awesome. I'm like, okay, you're the man. Um, Leg day, I'm just like, I don't care. I'm just suffering. I don't care. I'm like, oh, cool, my legs are pumped. I don't care. So by hitting the arms first, it gives me something to look forward to. I'm like, ooh, looking juicy, bro. Nice. and then
You're like my
ironically,
you're like my training partner, dude. He's the same exact thing.
ironically, a net benefit of this is, or a side effect of this, is it actually warms your body up a little bit too, like physically. So you're kind of more geared and primed to actually hit your leg movements that you're actually supposed to be hitting. So that's like, but that's like a good example where like a little extra frequency, like why not? I know a lot of people do it with calves. They'll throw calves in on different
Ooh,
days.
me. Yeah,
Yeah,
me.
well, not everyone just picked the right. I picked the right set of parents because I had a choice, obviously.
Yeah, not
Um,
me.
so genetics there. I won't talk about my calf training because it doesn't exist. But yeah, that's a good anecdote there. Um,
Yeah. If you want to get even more freaky with it for those more advanced guys out there, look into AM and PM sessions if you really want to pack in the frequency.
I love the gym.
Yeah. Me
Not
too.
until we build the home gym we have planned
Yeah.
will I ever try to go to the gym twice a day. I love
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I
It's for people with their own gym, really,
I just
or
I
live
don't know
there.
what I the gym is, it's not mentally taxing because I feel recharged after the gym, but like to bring myself, and you know how I lift, to bring myself into that state of mind twice a day, like I don't think that would be healthy. I
Yeah,
don't think
but
that would
no,
be
it's
good.
true. There are strategies for like or ways of and this could bring us really nicely into our next topic. But it's actually the exercise selection for your AM session and your PM session. You have to do it in a way that you're not going to go in like, oh my god, I got to do that again. Like so you might hit something like your harder session in the morning, and then at night hit some like forearms and biceps and maybe like rear delts, something like that.
I could
So
see
you're
my
fresh.
I could see myself doing like my compound lifts, like go in, do some I always will do leg curls to grease the knees, get them warmed up. I swear by that. RIP John Meadows, just a great mind that brought that to my, actually I think a coach brought that to me first, but he learned it from John Meadows and then I saw John Meadows talking about it. But the greasing your knees with leg curls before leg compounds, because like you'll notice, even me, I
Yeah,
don't have any issues. Like I don't, luckily, knock on wood, I don't have any lower back, knee, shoulder, any issues.
me too.
But even then, there will be times you go to the gym, you like load up on your leg exercise, your compound of the day, and you're like, ooh, my knees don't feel good today. And like they're just not, they don't, and that's why I like to call it greased. They feel, they're not literally, but they feel kind of dry. They feel creaky. And then, but you do a set of leg curls before, and now they're loose, they're lubricated, they're greased. So that's something I love to do. But I could see myself doing my compounds in the morning and then at night being like, okay, cool, let's hit some, let's hit some leg curls, some leg extensions. If I'm feeling froggy, some lunges. I could see me splitting it up like that. But that does bring us to our point of exercise order. We did miss, we'll get into that next because I actually came prepared this time, guys. I have notes. Um, but we'll get into like how much rest to take. And we can actually break up rest with literal rest, like days off. But for exercise order, how should you structure your workout from start to finish? And I'm going to let Mikey, after I say my piece, get into something we talked about a couple weeks ago, which I think is a really, really, really good idea. But generally, I am a compounds first guy. Let's get your heaviest, hardest lifts out of the way with a caveat that typically for everything I'm going to do, like with leg curls before my leg compounds, there will be some type of warm up. On chest day, I'll hit pec deck or some chest flies just to get some blood flowing, just to, prime the muscle, get it ready, like wake it up. Hey, we're going. I like to do that. Um, on a back day, I like to do like rope pullovers because I don't have a gym with the awesome Nautilus pullover machine anymore. Best machine ever created.
Rip.
I
R.I.P.
know. So I'll do like some rope pullovers on back, like on a shoulder focus push days. I'll do some Y raises, just something to, again, like grease the joint, get you kind of warmed up, get the blood flow. And then from there, yeah, I'm going to start with compounds. The reason I'm going to start with compounds and we get back into progressive overload and things like that is on my big money lifts. Those things you're doing the most weight, the most load. I want to be fresh. I want my performance to be the highest. You could argue that they might not necessarily be because you can look at, oh, well, if you isolate a muscle better, it's going to grow better. Sure, I still think your biggest bang for your bucks, what's really driving good growth, is going to be those heavy compounds for a multitude of mechanistic reasons for
It's a
muscle
fact.
growth. So
Fact.
I want my performance to be peak there. So I don't want to have done a bunch of exercises, then get into it and then be like, oh, well, I'm doing half the weight 'cause now my legs are tired. So I'm going to start with the compounds. And another reason for this is safety. If you're more fresh, you can handle the weight better and all that. It's going to be more predictable. It's going to be safer because I will note, like the other day, I went to the gym. I think it was incline bench I was trying to hit. Someone was on it. So I did a couple things before it. I go and I load up the weight that is my typical load set, which was I like to act like I know everything, but this was a rookie mistake. I like loaded up with the weight I was going to do. And I was like, oh, not good. I got like 3 reps. I was like, not good. That was a bad idea. So that it can throw you off. Your chance for injury goes up. Well, it can. No, I'm not saying it always will. Because sometimes actually, and this will get into what Mike is talking about, sometimes actually hitting your isolation or your more accessory movements first then require you to do less weight on these
Yeah.
load sets. And then you can
Right.
argue that's safer. So it's not inherently safer, but it can be safer depending on context. But yeah, generally I'm going to say, okay, let's go in. Let's do, compounds. Let's get our biggest bang for the buck movements. Okay, cool. Compounds are hit. Let's move on. I kind of, in my mental framework, I kind of look at the compounds as like intense. Then I have like or yeah, we'll call it, and their challenge and how hard they are, whatever, and how much weights move will have like intense. Then I have like a more moderate movement. So I just did dumbbell bench or not dumbbell, barbell bench or incline bench. I do not flat bench. Barbell incline bench. Then I might hop to like a plate loaded chest press. And I mean, honestly, it's kind of hard to compare those because you can get really nasty on a plate loaded chest press, but you know what I mean? Like it's a little it's backed off in the complexity of the movement, the load, and all that. And then I'll go from that to like a fly. My third chest exercise would be like a fly, right? One, I'm working like different movement patterns, but it's kind of like I'm going from hard, medium, easy. That's kind of how I view like how I order my exercises, if that makes sense.
The word complexity was actually really perfectly stated. Like the complexity of the movement is going down.
Yeah, and that's where like even though like I could argue and sometimes my compound movement is a plate loaded chest press, but in terms of different muscles and dare I say stabilizers and everything used on a incline barbell bench versus a incline plate loaded bench, very different. But the barbell bench is going to be more taxing. I don't think really there's anyone that's going to argue that just because the other peripheral recruitment that's going to be needed to do that. So yeah, I kind of approach it like that. Another like fun way, I this isn't like perfect in all contexts or whatever, but a fun way I look at it is I might do barbell or like a good machine, plate loaded machine, then a dumbbell, then a cable. That might paint a bigger picture to what I mean by this. Which honestly, that kind of when I'm just going in, don't really have a plan, I'll do that. And it works pretty good. But I'll let Mikey get into why sometimes, and why honestly this doesn't really matter that much. It matters, but not that much,
It
and why you don't.
right.
Oh, it's not a rule. It can be broken.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because like Ox was describing, there's two directions in which you can, sort of order your exercises. On one direction, like he described, going more compound to more isolation, you can really you can drive more raw stimulus per set. So if you're looking to pack in the most bang for your buck, you're going to really want to start with compound first, and then get less and less complex until you get into your isolation stuff. That'll get you the most bang for your buck. Um, so you might be wondering, like, well, why would you ever want to do anything other than that order? Well, there's a lot of reasons why, but one of the reasons actually, it it came to light from observing like Chris Bumstead, who is now the 5 time, as of this recording, the 5 time men's classic Olympia champion. His training sessions, he posts them on YouTube, and you observe one of his leg days, and it started off with more isolation, and then moved to more and more complex and compound. And so the reasoning behind this for a lot of these guys who are getting closer and closer to the competition is they really want to reduce the risk of injury. So if you think of it like this, you start off with the isolation stuff. The risk of injury for the more controlled isolation movements, it's obviously going to be a lot lower than getting, for example, under a heavy barbell. Okay, so let's compare and contrast. So you have a heavy barbell on your back as your first movement. And you're going really heavy because you're fresh. So the raw stimulus is very high, but also the fatigue is very high, and also the potential for risking injury is higher than it would be if you were fresh
Can
on
I
like
add
a leg
a
extension.
side note to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
To for your point.
Yeah,
So if we revert back to what we were talking about earlier, that and we can back it up even a little bit. Um, for set to be considered effective, generally less than 5 reps in reserve, meaning you had less than 5 reps still in the tank when you finish, right? And so we need that. Plus, we need to be 6 to 20 rep range, right? So if you're fresh, you're not going to be able to fake the body out in any real meaningful way. So you
right,
have to go
right.
heavy. Like you're not just going to be able to fake it. Where if you actually are fatigued, then it's genuinely 6 rep. If you were hitting fresh, 500 pounds on a squat for 6 reps, when you're fatigued, your 6 rep failure very easily could be like 315. It could almost be like cut
Exactly.
in half.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just to add, I wanted to throw that anecdote out there.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right, and so if you observe then the opposite order, if you go from more isolation to compound, using the example of, let's say, quad day, where we have a leg extension, and then after that we have uh, more compound, we have like a leg press, and then after that we have even more compound, we have like a barbell squat. The barbell squat compared to the barbell squat at the beginning of the exercise, it's gonna be night and day, like Ox was describing. Like you could say like 500 pounds, maybe to 315. This is observable if you watch Bumstead's training. If you watch Bumstead, you go on YouTube right now and you look up Chris Bumstead, and you find the date that's right before his Mr. right before the Olympia competition. You'll see that he ends up with, I think he's on the Smith squat, and if you look at the plates on there, not as high as in other times you've seen him load up that Smith squat. And so the reason, like Ox was describing, is by the time you're getting to, as the session moves on, your ability to drive as much force goes down. Now you could still hit failure, you could still challenge the muscles to failure, but it won't require as much weight by that point. So you could still, and here's the thing. If we kept volume, and this might get a little bit complicated, and if it's too complicated, Ox will clear things up. But if you keep volume the same, like the number of sets from going from compound to isolation and isolation to compound, and the volume was the same, and you were to observe, well, let's take a look. Which one gave you the most raw stimulus? It would be, in fact, the compound to isolation. That is true. But if we look at fatigue and we compare the two, fatigue is way lower for the isolation to compound. So that opens up this interesting this interesting opportunity to just add more sets to the isolation to compound to get a comparable or even slightly more stimulus than the first than from the compound to isolation. Now this gets into some murky sort of details here, but this in the theory is the idea. And so so there are applications to this, and one of the applications is if you really want to be safer, or if you're more of a higher volume guy, you want to spend more time in the gym, you might want to do the isolation to compound stuff. Does that roughly make sense? Did I explain that well enough?
I hate that I'm about to say this.
Oh shit.
Yeah, like you're right. You really, I very rarely, and you know this, will be like, "Yep, more volume is definitely the answer here." But yeah,
Yeah, you
if
know
you
it's a
did
good
add
point if he
more
says that.
volume in terms of isolation rather than compounds, yep, you're right. It's not in context, not how I do it, because I still want that raw stimulus. But yeah, that's it's true. I hate. Ah,
It's a
damn it.
great discussion because it opens up like, when do you want to do one or the other? And I still think, and here's the thing, I actually last session, it's so funny because Ox, uh, apparently he had a really rough leg day. Apparently, no, I'm kidding. He really had a rough leg day, and it's funny because I also had a really rough leg day at the same time, and we were like commiserating in parallel with one another, and and sort of we were kind of like thinking of, well, why did we push it so hard? And I actually remember why uh my training was so rough today. Well, I went back to compound to isolation after training isolation to compound,
Oh,
and that was the trigger. And so I was on that leg press yesterday, and I was driving some serious weight, and I was looking at my logbook, I'm like, oh my god, I'm getting like, hundreds of pounds more, and
ooh,
like, yeah. And so,
I
and
got
I'll tell you my preference then. I do prefer compound isolation. I just do. I just prefer it. But there is application in the reverse. So
it.
that's kind of the nuance there.
This is why there are no rules, and all the rules are meant to be broken. So weight training is not black and white. You don't always have to do the same things at all time. And a lot of people break training. They periodize. Oh, I'm not even going to try that. So they'll have, for this 12-week period, we're doing things one way, and this 12-week period, we're doing it this way. Even within this, you can have micro cycle. We can get a meso, micro cycles, all that. But this 4 weeks, we're going to do compounds and compound isolation. This 4 weeks, we're going to do isolation to compounds. This last 4 weeks, we're going to go back to compound isolation. I hope I didn't get that backwards. I hope I stayed
I think you got it. I think you
okay.
nailed it.
Um, so you can then argue if the goal is progressive overload for growth. So when you took those time off compounds, right? If you were compounds to isolation for 4 weeks, then 4 weeks you go isolation to compound, right?
Mhm.
So you're changing your training up, yes, and you're changing the load and the stimulus and all that, but you're still hitting those exercises just in a pre-fatigued, a pre-exhausted, for lack of a better term, state, right?
Exactly.
So then you could honestly, I'm not even from the South. You can make an argument then in that last 4 week block where you move compounds up again to your first movements, that you might be stronger on those compounds from, the good rest that you just got and everything. So then that could drive more progressive overload, some more growth. It's not going to work out perfectly. And there's probably some cases where you actually regress a little bit on more specific movements, but there are times where that kind of periodization would work. So that's where rules are just
Yeah.
completely meant to be broken.
And this is
And
what makes it so interesting too. But go ahead.
yeah, because there's no rules here. There's literally parameters. And that's why we're going over this in a way of like, hey, here's kind of like the parameters, and then explaining how, yeah, they can be broken all the time. Now, for a beginner, just try to stick. Don't just try to stick with the basics of what we're saying here. This is gonna when these things apply to you, you'll know they apply to you. It will be you'll know. No one needs to tell you. You'll know. A point I wanted to touch on, and you were talking about safety and all that, is I don't think people understand how bad of a place physically bodybuilders going into a competition, like right there at their competition date. So we'll say like 4 weeks out, 8 weeks out to a competition. how bad of like a physical state they look amazing.
They're primed to be injured.
They look amazing, and they even look bigger because they're leaner and they're more separated. They look bigger. They look like they are in peak condition, and they are from a body fat standpoint. Yeah, they have little to no body fat. But when it comes to actual their strength is way down. Their the integrity of their joints and everything is way down. They are primed to get hurt. And so that's honestly something even for, some of our more intermediate advanced, I mean, even beginners here that if you do choose, you're like, okay, I want to get really, really, really lean, or even just dieting in general. And you start noticing because back to calories in, calories out, you're in an energy depleted state from, cutting in that deficit for so long that sometimes it's smart to approach these things in a different light. That
That's a
sometimes,
great application, actually. I didn't think of that.
yeah, you're cutting, you're getting towards the end of a cut, you're lean, your energy's low and everything. So this is where things like this really come into play. This is where things like, okay, I'm going to actually stay a little bit away from failure. That's actually, and I can't believe I'm saying another two things this episode. I'm like, can't believe I'm saying this. But in those instances, that's where, okay, maybe instead of going to failure, maybe you go too shy. Even then, this gets super nuancy, but then it'd be like also your volume, your intensity is lowering, and your volume should also probably cut back a little bit, but we won't really get into that. This is more niche
Agreed.
example. This is going to be more
Agreed.
like competition bodybuilder, but you do need to know intelligently. And this is why I don't think people should obsess with fitness outside of professionals. They shouldn't obsess with it,
Let us
a-
obsess.
and it shouldn't
Yep.
be their lives, but
Yeah.
they should listen to the people that are obsessing with it, take away these years and years and years and years of learning we have, take our spark notes, take our suggestions, and learn as much of that as you can. Because the more knowledge you have, you're going to know, okay, when to intelligently apply these things within certain context, and it can really save your ass. Because someone that doesn't know any better, they're just going to keep doing the same things over and over and over again. And if they're not learning new things, that's when you start to get stuck. So that's why we do this podcast, why I write and everything, is because I don't think you should be obsessed with it. Let me be obsessed with it. Let me break it down into bite-sized pieces for you so that you can apply it, so that you can eventually, like I said earlier, get to the goal where you really don't even need a plan. You can kind of just walk into the gym and you'd be like, okay, cool. This is this is probably what I need to do today. Let your instincts take over. And it applies like that with diet. Learn a lot about diet and the principles behind diet, and you can kind of, okay, cool, hey, I'm gonna cut back carbs a little bit this week. I'm holding a little bit of water, let me drop that, and like things like that. So not to totally side tangent this is definitely going to be a longer episode. I'm having fun though.
Yeah,
I'm
but you make great points about that what kind of what we're doing is we're getting into the weeds so that we can come out of the weeds.
It's
you
an
know.
hour, it's an hour
Yeah.
for our listeners, but this is years of weird obsession that no one really should have. Like, I hope you have something in your life you're this obsessed with that's productive and all that for you and makes your life better. Um, but like, I wouldn't want Elon Musk start becoming obsessed with this stuff. I'm like, hey, dude, you stay obsessed with like rockets and getting us to Mars and cool cars and stuff. Let us take care of this. Outsource, but still become knowledgeable because it will help you.
There's one thing that we didn't touch on yet, that we should probably go over before we get into our final takeaways here, and it's I think rest time we should go over
Oh
rest
yeah.
time. So between sets and even taking days off, we already went over. Actually, we discussed training like 2 to 4 days a week, and try to progress more towards 4 as adherence gets better and better.
For a beginner, right?
For a beginner, right?
Okay,
Yeah, for a
cool. I had
beginner.
to.
And so um, that inherently necessitates rest days, and so rest days. So what's your approach to rest days?
So for a higher level guy, we're talking you have years under your belt. Not when I say years, I'm not talking 3, 4. I'm talking like maybe 5 or more. Um, you're gonna kind of know, and it's gonna be off feel. But generally, what I've found to be true For the vast majority, I'll kind of break it down into beginners, intermediates, and advanced. Advanced, it really starts getting individual basis. But for a beginner, it's not necessarily that you just need all this rest. It's just that you just don't need to be doing more. So it doesn't really matter as much because you're already just going to be doing something like 3 days, like you said, 2 to 4 days a week and all that. How you split that rest up, as long as you're not feeling just completely run down during a session, that's you're going to be good just by design. Once you get into intermediates, and let's say you start getting into things like push pull legs or whatever, right? So, and there's a bunch of different splits you can run. Now, there's vastly different ways you can do this. Some people do like push pull legs, rest, push pull legs. And I know that doesn't end up perfect on a calendar, but you take a rest after each subsequent leg day. Some people do like push pull legs, rest one day. I see that run commonly. I cannot say I'm a fan of that. I do not like the idea of 6 days in a row with no rest. That's not something I've done that before. I did not grow very well. Put it that way. That is in that where I talk about after my foundation, I just didn't really take the time to learn the way I should have learned. I was just like, oh, this is how people do it. So I'm going to do it that way. This is part of my stagnation period. So I generally say for every two sessions in a row, 1 day off. At most, every 3 sessions in a row, 1 day off. Um, Previously, it for me, this would look like push, pull, off, rest day, legs, rest day, repeat. So I'm basically, between pull and legs, I'm taking a rest day. Then after legs, I'm taking a rest day. Now it looks like push, legs, pull, rest day, push, density, rest day. So still, I do not like to go more than 3 days in a row without rest. And then backing it up to like intermediate, well, still talking about intermediates here. It's going to be feel. You're going to need to feel, but just generally, if you can keep in mind that, like, really, if you go, 2, 3 days in a row, you might want to start looking at adding a rest day in there. And something with this I want to hit is that your program does not have to be a Monday you do chest, Tuesday you do this. Like, it can rotate. So as I was saying earlier, I did a push, pull, rest day, legs, rest day, push, pull, rest day. That actually on a 7 day calendar doesn't work out at all. It rotates. So on Monday, some Mondays are a rest day, some Mondays are a leg day, some Mondays are a push day. It rotates. It's a living, breathing thing. I am catering to the training. I'm not catering to a day of the week, which is an arbitrary human made thing. Our body has no idea what day of the week it is. So that's something to keep in mind. As you get advanced, really two ways you can look at this. Some advanced guys, as crazy as this sounds, might actually need more rest because you might be doing so much raw stimulus and so much raw fatigue in a session that actually you act 1 day on, 1 day off. Because you can even look at, there's some advanced programs where 3 days a week is what you're going to be doing for that period. You'll probably progress to more 4 or 5 day a week training, but because the stimulus and fatigue is so high, you might even need rest days. But generally, the other way it can swing is you're going to split your training up more, and you might even see someone do something like a bro split. So now they're only, taking 1 or 2 rest days a week because, let's be real, like an arm day, that's not really like, it's kind of an active recovery day. So I'll let you clean that up. I said a lot.
The core, behind this is just recovery and letting your muscles recover and grow. It's always like it's kind of commonly said these days now that, like, you don't really grow in the gym. It's true, you don't grow in the gym. You grow out of the gym when you're resting, when you're sleeping, when you're having good nutrition. And what you were mentioning, Ox, that you did a 6 day a week program where it was like 6 days in a row you were training, and you said that you didn't get good growth results. And it's like, on paper, you would think that training more means more. It's like, and and there is truth to that. but there but if you're training, that means that you're prioritizing the gym that day. That means that you have to drive to the gym. That means you go to the gym. You put your body under stress. That means that you have to plan out the rest of your day to get around the gym and the gym can then be this source of just stress on your life, especially if it's like a leg day. You're dreading it, so it ends up being that you don't allow yourself enough recovery. So let me just preface this by saying that we can recover quite well if we prioritize with bodybuilding. I mean, we can recover quite well between sessions if we prioritize our sleep and our nutrition and keep our stress low. But that gets harder and harder the more days you add on, and you just end up kind of stagnating. So if you go too many days a week, so I think 6 is a little too much. I would agree with you there. And so again, the concept of rest days here, giving our bodies the chance to actually do the growing and adapting to to the stimulus. And it's not just recovery. For example, I use the word adapting there for purposefully because sometimes we could just spend all of our energy just recovering from the damage and not adapting and getting stronger. The adaptation process is in addition to the recovery process. And so I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it perfectly. I
There
think that we could,
was
yeah.
there was one more little piece to this before we wrap this up, get into like rest between sets and stuff. But when it comes to recovery, and especially when we talk about, and it depends on the audience we're talking about, people that are just in the gym and they're doing it because they know they want to look good and they want to be healthy, but it's not a big part of it's not something they're just super happy about, right? You're going to probably err more on the side of, okay, how much rest do you really need? Like, you can get away with more than you think you can get. Where this becomes an issue is with people like me and Mikey, true gym bros, people that are just looking to maximize everything in the gym all the time. And it's everyone listening to this is either fallen into this or will follow into this if they're more of a gym bro. They're going to hit a point where they're just like, oh, I need to be doing more. I need to be doing more. I need to be doing more. I need to be doing more, to the point, and this is where I was getting at when I started stagnating. To Your body can take a lot, but if you're not giving it these times off, you're going to stagnate. And so, for people that are really into the gym in that gym bro phase, you would be amazed that a lot of people rest more and grow more. Go to the gym less, rest more. If you're going 6, 7 days a week, like, start going 4 or 5 days a week and taking more rest days. And for some people, because when we talk about the raw stimulus and everything, you're fresh, so you can hit your sets harder and everything. When you start accounting for those things, when you start taking more rest and you're more fresh going into sessions, so you have more productive sessions, more effort, more intensity, better execution of your exercises and everything like that, you can actually start to see way better growth because you're actually working in congruence with your body. Where you're like, okay, cool. Like, we're not just in these nagging pains and sore 24/7. Like, we actually get a break. And I think that's just a healthy way to approach the gym too. To break that mindset of more is more, because the body's a finite resource. And if you start, now you're doing 60 sets, 70 sets per week. And you'd be surprised. I'm sure there's people out there doing that. Like, they're like, okay, I'm not growing anymore. It's like, yeah, you're way past your recovery capabilities, bro. Like, you're going to get rhabdo, not literally, but
Yeah, absolutely. Well put. So let's get into rest between sets. And so, what are your recommendations
it's,
on that?
it kind of goes to the same principle of what I just said, is that, so if we're looking at what builds muscle, right? We're talking about, and we'll actually do an episode on this, like the actual mechanisms behind this, like like metabolic stress, mechanical tension, and all that. That's a little bit too in the weeds for episode 3, but essentially, you
Excuse me.
want to be fresh as you can be and prepared to attack your subsequent sets with the maximum amount of performance and effort. So, how do we achieve that? Well, if I'm only resting 30 seconds, I'm not going to achieve that. I'm still going to be taxed from my set before. I'm not going to put out the most effort and performance I can. But, if I stretch that out, I start taking 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes of rest. And to some people, it sounds like ages. There's there's data and empirical and anecdotal evidence backing this up that if you start resting, 2 to 5 minutes between those sets, you're recovering better between those sets, which means you can perform better on those sets. You can get more reps and everything than you were going to get, which that, eh, then can add to this progressive overload, and it's going to let you grow better. So generally, my recommendation with that logic is going to be 2 to 5 minutes. Now, if you literally just you don't have time and you need to get through your workouts, like if you're doing like a minute rest, you'll be okay. But if you really want to maximize performance on sets, especially if you're one of these lower volume, higher intensity guys like I am, each one of your sets really matters. It really, really matters. So you need to make sure, because you're doing so few sets, that the sets you're doing, you're giving it everything. So you're going to want to be rested between sets. Sometimes I don't even suggest rest times to people. I'll be like, hey, do your second set when you feel that you're ready to perform that second set with max intensity, that you can attack that set with all you have. Generally, honestly, that's kind of scratch everything I said. That's actually kind of a good benchmark, as long as you're not, sitting there 10 minutes between sets on your phone, or, your life is now spent 3 hours a day at the gym. So within reason, I'd say that's actually kind of a good benchmark. It's like rest until you feel that, okay, cool. And you'll learn with experience, like about how long that is. And like, okay, how long do you need to rest before you can attack this again with max effort?
I think that's perfect, actually. And I actually didn't know you were going to say that. I thought you were going to give and you did. You give a range. It's a good range. 2 to 5 minutes is a great range. Three being I think a solid middle ground in general. Five for more, super compound heavy. Like for example, if you're going to do some super heavy barbell back squats, five is probably your guy.
That's a
Um,
good point, because like,
yeah,
do I really need to rest like 5 minutes between cable bicep curls?
right.
No.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I like that you added in sort of to go by feel, because that adds in this element of self, regulating and sort of learning your body, learning, how you like to train and how you get the best results. So that adds in a good mechanism for people to actually start to self regulate. But within those guidelines, I think it's perfect. I think you stated it really well.
And
Um, yeah.
what's funny is there is some literature, but that 2 to 5 minutes isn't necessarily like because of clinical findings. That's kind of like a lot of gym bros throughout the years, through our advanced studies of bro science, have just kind of found that that just so happens to be the time range that what I said happens, that you actually feel, okay, cool. Within 2 to 5 minutes is probably when your body's going to recuperate and you're going to be able to attack the sets. Ignoring any data or whatever,
Yeah.
that's when it's going to happen.
That's good. Yeah, it's. I think we might have covered everything, because
I,
I wanted to get into like a sort of final takeaways, because there is one thing that like sort of like a message to beginners I have. What would be? Is there anything else we haven't covered yet?
I'm going through all my notes. I think there is one piece, little side note, when it came to like the rep range. So 6 to 20 reps. However, this is more for like some of our advanced guys too. And we'll give them that way, they're not like, oh, I knew all this already. So I do see a time where maybe hitting a triple, 3 reps or whatever might work. And that's plateau busting. So you've been stuck on something and you can't get, you're not really increasing the reps, you're not really getting there, right? Well, maybe it's smart to then do a triple. And I use this so sparingly. We're talking once or twice in a 12-week period, that it's like, okay, cool, I'm going to go heavier than normal today, because maybe that raw stimulus, that different kind of stimulus, that's going to be more in the strength realm, that's going to be more neurological adaptation, maybe that's what I need to trigger this additional stimulus for the body. That, okay, cool. Like, now next time we hit this set, that number we were stuck on, okay, we're past it. We're flowing again. That was one little keynote I wanted to add there, a little caveat that, and it comes down to, again, just thinking about this intelligently and where you can break the rules, because there's not, these aren't laws. These are guidelines.
Yeah. So I guess with that covered, would you have any uh, what would be like your biggest takeaway, I guess, for like beginners or even intermediates, but like what would be your big takeaway for them? Like what should be the number one thing that they should focus on, uh, given everything we've talked about already?
It kind of ties it all together, and that would be, get really good at doing the exercises first and foremost. And we're in the internet age, and you have videos, demonstration videos. There are millions of demonstration videos for these exercises. You have a smartphone, more than likely. Videotape yourself doing a set. It's okay. Everyone does it now. You're not weird. Videotape yourself doing a set. Make sure you look good. Watch these videos. Compare. Okay, do I learn how to get really good at the movements? You have all the resources at your fingertips to know how to do exercises well. So use those. Get really good at learning the movements. Then this is more, as you get, I mean, beginners can learn this, but as you get more intermediate, learn the little nuances of movements, of execution. Learn, okay, if I perform a lat pull down and I'm leaning back and I'm pulling, back towards my body, okay, I'm going to hit more of my middle upper back. But if I'm pulling more from the front of my body and I'm pulling more down instead of back, okay, cool. Now you're biasing your lats a little bit. And those are the finer details that can really be like the cherry on top of growing and building a good physique, because you're starting to learn how to actually use and target these muscles, because it all ties in that the biggest thing you should be learning in this initial period too is how to get very, very, very good at doing the movements. That alone will make you grow, even if you're not really adding weight. But if you're getting better at using the muscle initially, you will grow. Like, that is progress. That is, you are progressively getting better at doing a movement, which is a form of progressive overload. So that would be my biggest takeaway for intermediates and a lot of even advanced guys. Get better at the actual movements.
It's so funny because when we started the podcast and we're going through all these different things, I knew that this would come up at the end because and it's funny. This is, I would say, the number one most important thing, basically exactly what you said, for beginners to focus on. So those first 3 years, like I mentioned at the very beginning, they're a grace period. God has granted you a grace period in which to basically to get free gains, three on the longer side possibly, but at least the first year and a half, you get basically free gains. That is a time where you need to be 100% focused on improving your technique. And there's a number of ways to do this, which we will get into definitely in the future. Maybe we'll have an entire podcast dedicated to how to improve your technique. But one way, before we wrap up, I think, is not only to get the form down, but tempo is another huge thing. And again, this is a kind of a can of worms in a sense. It's pretty simple, but you want your tempo to be one that promotes good form. Because let's say I said to you, tempo meaning the cadence of your movement. So if you're doing a chest press, for example, and I say on the concentric, meaning the pressing motion of the bench press, I want that to be 1 second or as fast as you can. And then at the very top, I want you to hold it for 3 seconds. And then I want you to lower it 1 second. And then I want you to hold at the very bottom for 1 second. So this gives us 4 points of time in which we can say, which we can call tempo. So you can have, it's like a 4-digit code. So if it's like 4111, it's a 4 second eccentric, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, the point really being that this emphasis on tempo is actually important, I've found, in promoting good form, because it's kind of hard to have bad form if I'm forcing you to lower the weight under a certain time span. Because if I'm telling you you need to lower the barbell for 4 seconds, there's no way you're going to be sloppy in the execution of the lowering of the weight because it's so slow. You're going to be forced to take the path at which is makes it possible to lower it 4 seconds. So I bring this up at the last second, but it's very important. I think tempo and form go hand in hand, and they are the keys to developing technique that will get you really great gains. And then as you're leaving that beginner period of your training experience, you'll be set to make steady gains as an intermediate.
We're never going to finish this because this brings up another really good point, or a
I'm down to
couple
keep going.
points. And that is, it does a couple really good things for you by focusing on tempo. And one of those is it kills the ego. The ego doesn't really have a place in the gym. It in your lifts, it doesn't have a place because ego loves to flirt with injury. So if you haven't ever and you start focusing on tempo and you start doing a tempo scheme, guess what? You're going to start lifting less weight. Most people are going to they're going to be like, oh, wait, because they're relying on things like momentum and a bunch of other factors that are just, once you are at the level of understanding that we are, it's so funny because it might look cool. No one actually cares, but you might think it looks cool and all this because, oh, you're pushing all this weight. But if your goal's to grow and you're just slinging a bunch of weight with momentum haphazardly, you're not maximizing mechanical tension and all these things that go into growing a muscle, you're actually just hurting yourself. You're not cool. You're actually being really dumb. And so you're setting yourself up for injury and you're setting yourself up just to not grow as well. So, yeah, tempo is another just really, really good thing to keep in mind because, yeah, it's going to kill the ego, which should help you lift longer because you cannot train a hurt muscle. It doesn't
Right.
happen.
And it promotes good form. So uh yeah, I think we covered a lot tonight. And
I
I
think we
think
did. I think we
yeah.
did. On New Year's Eve, it is, oh,
I've
we're
I've got
almost there.
yeah, I've got 10 minutes
You've
here on the
got
East
10
Coast.
minutes. So we will wrap this up with Happy New Year's. And if you're
Yeah,
listening
happy New Year's.
and you want to, you haven't, but you want to make the change, and this is your year, make it your year and stop talking about it. Just do it. Talk about it if you want. I don't really care, but you get what I'm saying. Just make it happen. Like, I promise you, Mikey can promise you, anyone that lives can promise you, if you can stick with this. And if you can make it 3 months, you're well on your way to having a habit built. The return on investment you're going to get in your life is is amazing. I saw a video the other day, and whether people want to accept this or not, largely true in my experience. If you show up in a room and you're the most in shape person in that room, you don't have to be Ronnie Coleman, you don't have to be a pro bodybuilder, but if you're in really good shape, people are going to assume you have your shit together. Your status, your standing in that room, your respect level that people have for you by default is higher because you look good. Okay, this guy looks good. He obviously trains, he's disciplined because that's what it takes to look good. What else? Like, he's got his shit together. Your life could be a mess, but they don't know that. They're going to think, "Oh, hey, this guy's got his shit together." So, in a lot of professional settings, like, hey, that's a good thing. Like, just in life, that's a good thing. And ironically, once you get your shit together in the gym, those skills you learn, the discipline, everything that's required to be successful in the gym, it transmutes and translates to other aspects of life. So I leave you with this. If this is your year and you're finally going to make it happen, just make it happen. You have, like, if your only goal of the day is just, hey, let's go hit that session outside of obviously your other life responsibilities, be a good parent, do all that. But just getting to the gym, make that your goal. Do that. Do that for 100 days. Report back. Let us know how much your life has changed because it'll be night and day difference.
Prioritize your health and lift weights in 2024.
I think I can I can toast to that.
Let's do it.
All right, everyone. Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year's.